All right, deep breath. January 20th, 2009, I had already gotten Thad and Megan and Emma off to school because they were a little bit earlier, and I had a little bit of time, so Jack and Luke, who were a little bit older, 7-ish and about 4 or 5-ish years of age, I said, well, why don't we go to breakfast? Why don't we go to breakfast? So I took them to this little diner in Argentine, probably seated all of about 20, maybe 25 people, meaning that when you went in there, you were close by the other tables. And so we went in there and ordered breakfast, and of course, probably waffles or pancakes and chocolate milk is what they ordered and so forth. But, while I was there, it was very, very easy for me to eavesdrop on people at other tables. And so I did, because it just was that close. And there was a group of gentlemen that were sitting at a table right next to us, and I could tell that these gentlemen probably met there often, and of course, over coffee and breakfast, in their discussion probably solved all the problems of the world. I always said, I want to be one of those guys one day that meets their friends and talks over coffee about everything that's going on. Well, I started to listen to their conversation, and their conversation began to really enrage me and really move me in a very angrily way. And they were talking about what was going to be happening on that particular day, January 20th, 2009, and that was Inauguration Day of President Obama, okay? And, of course, in their conversation, they were laughing and they were joking and, of course, just not happy with the way that the election had turned out. And, of course, just that whole idea of having that man as our country's leader just bothered them. And they really thought, and they were laughing about, what they could do. And one of the gentlemen, said, boy, you know what? There's going to be so many African Americans that day in the middle of the mall in Washington, D.C., there for the inauguration. Why don't we just go and drop a bomb and we'll take out about 1 million of them? I'll never forget that moment. And it bothered me so bad on that day. And all throughout breakfast, and I really don't think Luke and Jack understood or even heard or even thought about what was going on, but it just brought me almost to tears to hear my fellow human beings talking that way. Well, my brothers and sisters, I lacked courage on that day. And I remember leaving there, and I was bothered for days, for weeks, for months, even to this day, that I didn't take a moment, once my boys maybe were out of the restaurant, to go back and to challenge them, to say something to them, to say, something about the words that they had, even though they were joking, how horrible that was. It bothered me that much to a point where I've had it in other homilies. Well, I thought about it today. And why did I reflect on this story today in my life? Because I reflect on the event of today. Today we celebrate Palm Sunday. We celebrate a day where we honor Jesus as he enters into Jerusalem, just like the people did 2,000 years ago. They waved the palms. Why did they wave the palms? Because their king was coming into the city. Their king was bringing peace. Their king was bringing justice. And they waved palms because of their joy, because of their excitement, because of all the things that they had seen Jesus do. Well, what happened in the days to come? What happened in the days to come? All those people that were cheering for him, all those people that were cheering, our king is here, Hosanna to the Son of David. Okay, in Luke's gospel, he doesn't say that. He says, blessed is he. But in the other gospels, they use the word Hosanna. Hosanna means save us, our king. They were excited. They were full of joy because their king, Jesus, was here and he was coming into their city. And things were going to be different. But then, like I said, what happened throughout the rest of the week? Where were they? Because they were on the road as he carried that cross. They jeered him at that moment. They condemned him at that moment. Those same people that were cheering for him, where were they to protect him? Where were they to help him? Like I said, that moment in that restaurant, I thought about that in terms of our day today. Because I really felt like I failed my Lord. I turned away from my Lord. I turned away from the gospel because I didn't say anything. If you came to Stations of the Cross throughout our Lenten season on Wednesdays, we do this reflection, a different reflection, for the Stations of the Cross. And as you reach the station over there where Simon carries the cross, where the soldiers pick a strong man, to carry the cross with Jesus because, he was failing so much and they didn't want him to die along the path. Well, at the end of that little reflection about Simon carrying the cross, there's a few lines that always get to me and really stick out in my mind. And it basically was, okay, Simon picked up the cross and carried it, but where were his disciples at that moment? Where were the people that he cured? Where were the people that he taught, that he changed their lives over the course of the last 3 years? Where were they? Why weren't they there to help him? My brothers and sisters, it's kind of an irony that today we celebrate us waving these palms for this wonderful man, our Savior, the one that saves us, but then the rest of the week, people were silent. People were not there. I hope in some way you reflect on this day much like I have. And I think about those moments where I have asked Jesus to save me, I've asked Jesus to help me, I've asked him to give me strength, and then if it didn't go my way, where were you, Jesus? That's my question to him. I do that, I fail, just like that moment in the restaurant. And I vowed from that moment that I would never do that again. I would never turn my back on other human beings. I've stumbled, yes, but I try very hard in my life to stand up for what's right, to stand up for the gospel, to stand up for the good news, to stand up for those that can't stand up. And I think on this Holy Week, as we enter this most beautiful celebration that our church gives us each year, that we celebrate the passion, the suffering, the rejection, the disappointment, and the death, that maybe in some way that we can find life in this moment too. Because my friends, 2,000 years ago, on this day and into the week, they really didn't understand what was going on. They were afraid, and so they did run. But you know what? You know the end of the story. We know the end of the story. And the end of the story, or the story goes, we have celebration today. Then we do have passion. Then we do have death. But then we also have what? New life and resurrection. Last week, that was spring break for a lot of people, I think. Last week or whatever, it was the last couple weeks. And I decided in one of the afternoons, I took my foster granddaughters, Zoe and Atara, to a movie. And it was an afternoon, and I took them to see Snow White. And I thought, this is a perfect opportunity. I'll get my popcorn, I'll take a nap. Because why do I want to see Snow White? But I tell you what, I couldn't stop watching and I couldn't stop listening. And I don't know if you've seen this new version of it, but it has a very powerful message in it. It has a beautiful story. It kind of changes a little bit from the Disney version, of course. It's still a Disney movie. But in the very beginning, you see this young girl being brought up by her parents, the king and the queen. And of course, one day, the king says to his daughter, Snow White, he says, you are going to rule this kingdom. You are going to lead this kingdom. And he wanted to prepare her. And he said, when you rule this kingdom, I want you to keep certain things in mind. 4 things. He says, number 1, I want you to be fearless. Because people are going to try to challenge you. People are going to try to push you off of here. Okay, but I want you to be fearless. Be not afraid. Stand up and lead with strength. Be fearless. The second thing he said to her, he says, I want you to be fair. I want you to be fair. And if you ever looked at the way this man ruled, this king ruled, his kingdom was beautiful, and people were treated fairly. You know, the least were not the least. They were all together as one. And for those that didn't have, those that did gave to those that didn't have. There was fairness, fearless fairness. And the next thing he said is to be brave. To be brave. Because just like the first one, you're going to get people that are going to challenge the right way to do things, the good way to do things, the just way to do things. But be brave and stand strong for that. And the very final thing he said to him, always be true. Always be true. You know, do what is right, always. You know, I thought about that, and of course I wrote it down right away and said, there's a homily, okay? But I really think about Jesus as king and what he tried to do in those 3 years and what he tried to lead the people to. People waving those palms, that meant peace. Him coming in on a colt rather than a stallion said, I am here to bring peace. I'm not here to bring a strong arm. And we're going to find this peace through love. We're going to find this peace through fairness, through justice, through doing it right, through mercy. Again, 2,000 years ago, my brothers and sisters, they didn't know the end of the story, and we do. I hope in some way today you don't find yourself when Jesus doesn't save you the way you want to, that you don't run from him, that you don't ignore him, that you don't reject him, but you stay with him, you trust him, you have faith to get through. Because that's one of the messages of this week. There is life, you have it. You will have disappointment, you will have problems, you will have challenges, you will have death in your life, but at the end of it is new life. Always remember that. That's what he promises. Once again, my brothers and sisters, today is really us saying we know the end of the story. Let's live our lives that way. No matter what comes our way, we know the end of the story.